Welcome to The Game. This is the show where we go play by play analyzing the game of politics. Today, we're taking a look inside President Trump's tour around Asia. What do these trade deals mean for America? Are there wins? Are there losses? What is the analysis from our guests? Second, we're going to be looking at a recent poll from the Associated Press. They look at the Latino community. Where are they so far this year? Is President Trump winning support? Is he keeping it the same, or is he losing support? And what does this mean for the 2026 elections coming next year? Finally, the government shutdown continues. There is no necessarily date in end, but voters are starting to get a little bit anxious. We'll talk on what is the possibility of it reopening anytime soon. Joining me today, right here in studio, we have Marco Frietti, a Democrat strategist and analyst. Marco, thank you for joining us today.
Wally, happy to be back here.
And great to have you in studio. It's a pleasure. We also have coming from Arizona, Jonathan Soto, a conservative analyst and strategist today. Jonathan, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for the invitation. Pleasure to be here.
All right, let's get things started. As I mentioned, President Trump is in Asia on a high-stakes tour, meeting with allies like Japan. Japan has a new prime minister. It's the first time that President Trump is meeting with her. There's a lot of negotiations happening as well. The president hasn't yet met with China, but negotiations on a possible trade deal has already been talked about. There's also trade deals that have been signed with Malaysia and with Thailand. Without a doubt, Asia is one of the key continents when it comes to trade in the United States, but it's also one of the continents where we have the most tension with, specifically with China, our biggest rival, not just when it comes to economics, but when it comes to just the race of having technology, when it comes to having arms and just the future in general, currency, etc. So let's get started on this topic. Marco, I want to start with you here. Marco, again, great having you here in studio. We always appreciate your analysis on these topics. When it comes to just Trump in Asia, I want to start just top line. What are your reactions? How important is it that the president gets this tour right? I think many people have praises and critics when it comes to President Trump and his foreign policy. Sometimes it seems that when it comes to these trade, the markets react negatively, but then also later on, it seems like they react positively. At the end of the day, it seems like sometimes he gets his way. But when you look at this tour in general, how important is it that he gets it right?
Oh, it's important. I think one thing that Democrats and Republicans share common ground is Asia is important because of the threat China poses, not only militarily, but economically. Mm-hmm. So I think the president being there is something positive. The deals he's getting is a step forward towards the goal of countering China and their expansion in the area. I think one of the biggest criticisms you can give him is the moment of all of this. Obviously, there's a big event, but we are into 4 weeks in a shutdown. We're starting to see the effects. We're starting to see prices going up. We saw the inflation report last week. There's a lot of issues happening, and you see the president not only now in Asia, but Latin America, concentrating outside of our borders in a moment where there's a lot of issues within our borders. And let's step back. In 2024, the key message of Donald Trump was, let's focus in America, America first.
America first.
So I think especially his base are starting to see where is the America first, because we're seeing Argentina first, Caribbean first, now Asia. And we're suffering. We're not getting our SNAP benefits. We're not going to get our Medicaid, our insurance. We're not getting, but we're seeing help to Argentina. We're seeing the military operations in the Caribbean. So I think that might be one of the biggest criticisms of the moment. But going back to, is he doing what he's supposed to do in the international stage? I think in Asia, he is doing something that is key. Reaching out to these countries in the region, countering China, making these trade deals. That the idea is to benefit the country. But I think one of the key issues right now is we've seen the president celebrate a lot of these deals, mm-hmm. but when we want to see the details, there is no detail. So I think what's the deal actually getting us? Because we saw him celebrate the Vietnam deal a couple of months ago, mm-hmm. and there was an actual deal. There was just a handshake.
Framework, yeah.
But are they deals or they're just a framework to start working? But at the same time, we already have the tariffs playing their part. So I think Americans are not seeing any benefit yet of these deals because, again, the Vietnam deal being the example, we don't know what's actually getting us. But what we do have is tariffs, and we saw prices go up back to inflation 3% last week. I think we're starting to see the effects slowly, but we're starting to see the effects. Americans start to see it, so they're not seeing any benefit of the tariffs. They're not seeing benefit of the deals. So for the Americans, I don't think they're seeing anything yet. But it is key that any American president, Republican, Democrat, whatever, independent, is there trying to reach out to the
You
region.
can't ignore Asia. Yeah,
No,
it's a key part of just when it comes to trade, when it comes to something that the president has to look at. You can't ignore
yeah,
Asia. On that point, Jonathan, I want to go to you. So it is true. One side of the coin is folks are saying, like, when are we actually going to see all the details on some of these trade deals? But I want to ask you, right, to Marco's point, the America First strategy or the America First approach, some might say, hey, where is this when it comes to Asia? But the other side, and I would be curious to hear your opinion, is that getting trade deals right with Asia is essential to keep prices low, to keep trade high. I mean, how do you view this? Do you view this as part of the America First strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that the greatest part of this, from a long-term perspective and from a geopolitical standpoint, we have to understand that what we're experiencing right now is truly a war between China and the United States to determine who will dominate in the next generation, in the next century. And a lot of that, really, that battle is looking like building new partnerships, building new associations around the world. And part of this, really long term, is going to these countries and saying, hey, like, America wants to be your first partner, your first trading partner. We want to negotiate. We want to also have friendships and alliances in other ways. And so I think long term, this is preparing the stage for the United States to keep being that dominant force around the world. I think that in the short term, when we mix the domestic politics with it, I think we can lose sight of this. But I think long term, when we talk about creating that buffer, which the United States, part of its foreign policy, has always been a significant component. You go around the world, you put military bases, you supply foreign aid. But I think in this direction, we're talking more about trade. If your trade with your countries are solid, you have a lot of influence in their politics with other foreign actors. So I think this is a step in the right direction. In terms of trade deals, I think it's important to be cautious when governments are too concrete on certain details. Trade deals eventually or rapidly do become insufficient or outdated. And so I think it's because markets, they fluctuate, they change. The priorities of nation states and their comparative advantages really shift, and they shift because of their politics, they shift because of their resources, of their interests. So I think that when we talk about details, it's probably significant, but I think that that is best for those policy leaders. In the end, I do believe that trade is something that we should be doing with everyone. Every single country should be in the table. But I think when we talk about Asia, Asia, as you guys have mentioned, is key to not only the dominance, but really the freedom of the world. There are some ideas that stem from that region that do not serve the cause of liberty. And how we approach that, I think that trade has always been a solution because it allows this behavior to penetrate and for people to experience the outcome of that through prosperity and a better lifestyle. So, yeah.
A little bit to your point, Jonathan, I think conservatives are at an interesting point, are kind of a crossroad, right? Where historically conservatives have really pointed to a free trade, free market, pro capitalism strategy when it comes to many of these deals. But in the Trump era, we have seen a little bit of more of a nationalist, sort of America first strategy, right? Where the president has talked that many of these trade deals are focused on bringing American jobs back and making sure that America stays competitive, making sure that America is at the forefront when it comes to not just importing, but exporting. And some conservatives would say that free trade does that, but I think they're a little bit of a crossroad. Jonathan, I want to stay with you a little bit. One of my questions is, the president during his campaign talked that tariffs and trade deals were focused on a couple of things. They said, like I just mentioned, bringing jobs back, but then he also talked about it's a little bit more about fairness when it's about bringing down the tariffs that other countries have on us. The fact that some of these deals in Asia have focused, I think, more on the bringing tariffs down than they have on bringing American jobs back. Do you think that's something that the president will have to come back to the United States and sell to a lot of these voters who I think a lot of these voters were a little bit more focused on bringing jobs back? But I don't think, my personal opinion is that that is what these deals do. It's not about bringing some of these manufacturing jobs back, but it's about more about the competitiveness and the fairness of the deal. Do you think the president will be able to come back and sell these deals as positive and as something that is part of that America First strategy?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Wadi. I think that, when we looked at the election, and we looked at the rhetoric, we looked at the messaging, and it does come off as, a degree of nationalism. And there's some policies that, yeah, we can definitely argue that they're not necessarily for the free market, or that the policy outcome would, increase employment, or quote unquote make it America first, where it would guarantee more manufacturing or prevent companies from going overseas. But really, one of the biggest things that I think we've seen is that this has been more of a negotiation tactic to get countries to open up their doors for more trade. It has varied by country, but it seems that that is what's been happening, that these trade deals, they're intended to put pressure on them politically. I think we've seen that with Canada. We've seen that with Mexico, where the president comes out and says, hey, you're getting slapped with this big tariff. But then he changes it based on the reaction, based on the proposal. The critics say, oh, look, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's going back and forth. But in reality, as we know, one of the biggest things that defines President Trump is the art of the deal. And if you've ever read the book, it's a really interesting book, because regardless of your political beliefs, I always strongly recommend it to anyone that wants to go into business, because it gives you a reality of how human nature works. But most importantly, understanding yourself and understanding what surrounds you before you walk into a room. And I think that's very powerful. Obviously, we can all disagree with the president. I have a lot of disagreements, but this is one key thing where I think it's important to understand. These are negotiations. They change day by day. Even experts will tell you that. I don't know what the tariffs are going to do, because by next week they're going to be at a different rate proposal. And so I think to the core of it, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing negotiations, and the rhetoric might present something, but we have to wait to see what that policy outcome is.
Yeah. Marco, interesting enough, I had the opportunity to be in Vietnam 2 years ago, and the Vietnamese are not fans of China at all, right? I mean, they have a long history, 1,000 years ago, where China took a big part of Vietnam, and there are other countries in Southeast Asia that they actually welcomed the United States because they believe it takes a little bit of the power that China has, which is a lot of power. I think the president strategically is visiting all these other nations prior to coming to China. I think he wants to set sort of the tone that, hey, we're here in the region. We're doing deals with Malaysia, with Thailand, Cambodia, Japan. How important, in your opinion, is it, or what role does a final deal with China play for the president to be able to get the economy to a better place? We're going to talk a little bit in our next segment about Latinos and the economy, but in general, Americans, I think, have been waiting for that sort of that big boom in the economy. There are some that say it's moving in a better direction. There are others that are saying we still kind of feel that it's at the same place it was before. Do you think a deal with China could be the one that kind of gets our economy to a place where Republicans can run on something in 2026? Or do you think, no, it's going to fall flat and Democrats are going to be able to point to, hey, he hasn't delivered in this space?
The situation with China is complex because both, this is a zero-sum game. These are both two countries trying to achieve world dominance, in a sense, economic dominance. And right now, the economies are tied together. They depend one on each other. So these tariffs are just destroying each other's economy right now. But I think with China's, how they work, they have an upper hand. They don't depend on elections. They don't depend on the price of dolls, of Christmas gifts, of gas. So I think we're in a difficult situation here because we depend a lot on what they sell to us. I think it's key that the president is going around the region trying to see how, in the long term, we can disconnect this dependence on China. And some people might say, "Oh, but Vietnam is also a communist country." Okay, but Vietnam is not uh, aiming to control, to influence the world and counter the United States. So that's the big difference here, and that's why I think whatever president there is, either Trump, Biden, whoever comes next, this is something that needs to be done. But the reality is the process is going to be painful. It doesn't depend who the president is. So I think it's going to be a tough sell because what deal can Trump in this case get from Xi Jinping? Are we going to get investment from China? That's not going to happen. They're not going to invest in the United States. Are they going to lower barriers, or are they going to stop stealing trade secrets or technology from foreign countries? It's going to be extremely difficult. So what is the aim here? I think the reality is, and here it's, in a sense, I might be pushing a positive point for President Trump, is the tariffs are the reality if we are trying to counter China's economic influence in the American economy. But I think there's a big thing missing that is something that the Biden administration did get right, is not only should we try to start slowly disconnecting and shackling from China, but is what are we doing for our industries to become competitive again again, we had the Inflation Reduction Act that at the end of the day invested a lot in our green technology, in our chip manufacturing. Those things are key. We need to try to bring companies here. But right now we're not doing that. Right now what we're doing is threatening companies with tariffs, saying you should bring your company here so you don't pay tariffs. But as we've seen the president, and he said it, is like sometimes they're up, next day he takes them down. So business people do not make decisions on week by week changes. They need something solid 5-10 years into the future. So if not even the tariffs are solid, how are we expecting companies to come back to the United States? So I think, again, the president is focusing too much outside, the tariffs, the deals, but what are we doing here? Something similar to the CHIPS Act, something similar to the Inflation Reduction Act, so companies can start investing here, because that's actually the game. Where, I mean, if the aim of this administration is a nationalistic policy in economic statecraft, we're not seeing that. We're just seeing instability in the market, instability for the businesses, for the companies, for the corporations. What are we going to give them? I think that's the key thing that's missing in this administration. And that is the main part of this fight with China.
And you're going to need Congress to step in at a certain point, because I think a lot of what the president has done has been through executive orders. So let's say you're a huge supporter of some of these executive orders. What is going to go beyond President Trump? So if there's a Democrat who comes in, he can undo. Similar how to like President Trump undid a lot of what Biden did, so could another president come in that's a Democrat and undo what the president is doing. So this is where like Congress needs to play a role in general, just for the long term, because I do agree with you that many companies are trying to have 5 and 10 year plans. That's typically how companies operate, but in an environment where the rules are being changed possibly week by week. So it's an interesting dynamic in that space. I do want to move on to our next segment, which we're going to be looking at Latino voters send a warning. There's a new AP poll that really looked at the pulse of the Latino community. Some of the key points of this is that the favorability of Trump among Latinos dropped from 44% to 25% in this October poll. A lot of it has to do not just with a lack of confidence in the economy, but immigration continues to be a big point when it comes to this polling. The share of Latinos who say that the country is going in the right direction, in the wrong direction, rose from 63% to 73% of Latinos saying that they don't feel confident in the direction of the country. Marco, I want to continue with you. I mean, the reality is in 2024, Democrats not just lost the White House, they did not gain control of Congress. They don't have the Senate. They don't have the House. There seems to be that battle of the soul of the party, sort of looking at who's that future leadership. And one of the big points that many of us talk about is the Latino vote, how it didn't swing completely to Republicans, but President Trump and Republicans made significant gains. What do you make out of a poll like this heading into next election? Do you see 2024 as just like a one-off year where Democrats didn't do as well? Or can they do a victory lap with this poll? Or how do you analyze these numbers?
I'm a big. I argue always in favor that Democrats do not have a stronghold over the Latino. I think that that was lost probably in the last 1 or 2 decades. I think the Latino vote is now up for grabs because it's become more diversified. I still think the Mexican American base, the Central American base, that was the majority and it's still the majority of the Latinos, but now not as big as before. Still is more on the side of the Democrats, but I think that the growing Colombian community, Venezuelan community, Cuban community moving around, all this immigration that we received in the last couple of decades has been changing the vote. And that means that the Latino was now up for grabs because these are very different from the Mexican American, Central American communities. But going back to 2024, I think it was a sign, a warning sign for the Democrats, but not because of the Latino votes change, is because we forgot the main thing that they care about, and it's like they're not this unique group that is different from the rest of the America. They care about the same things, but and that's the economy, and that's what we're seeing now. Is like they did not vote for Trump for the rhetoric. They voted because they were angry of the economy. It wasn't working out for them. Trump said, "I'll make it work." They voted for him. Clearly now, 10 months in, it is not working. Inflation is going up. Jobs are being lost across the economy. We're not seeing the economic growth that was expected from the rhetoric of the president. I think that is changing the attitude of the Latino vote. So the economy is the first thing that has to be the main thing for Democrats, for Republicans on the Latino vote. But add to that immigration. Go back to the election. We were promised as a Latino that the people that are just working here, yes, they're here illegally, but they're working. They don't have any criminal record. They haven't done anything wrong. The only thing they've done wrong is cross a border or overstayed a visa because they wanted a better life. That is their biggest crime. They're being sent back home, or in some cases being sent to countries they've never been to, because we've seen the situation of people being sent to El Salvador. I think somebody was sent to also Libya. So it's very complex. So I think everybody in the Latino community has someone that has been going through the immigration issue and seeing people that have not done anything wrong, but at the same time contributed to the community for 10, 20 years. I think that is also changing the reaction of the Latino vote. Again, I think the majority of the country still is in favor of enforcing the rules of immigration, but seeing people that have not done anything wrong being sent out without due process, being mistreated. I mean, the images of just the ICE raids of how they've been conducted is just amazing. For me, one image that has talked to me is I saw an image of somebody with just cleaning up trash in a parking
I
lot.
saw that one. That was about a week or so
And like
ago.
5, 6 agents around him. And I'm like, this person has done nothing wrong. Yes, they have to abide by the law, but we have to have strong borders. I think nobody argues against that. But the people that have been here and have been key contributing to this economy, to this country for decades, need some sort of path to stay here if they have done nothing wrong. I think you see a lot of members of Congress in that position, but I think there's still the rhetoric from the White House is not matching that. So I think on the polls, we're starting to see the president pay for that. The economy is key, immigration is key, and it's just showing us that the Latino vote is still up for grabs.
Yep, very much, very much. Jonathan, and I want to go to you on the more conservative side. What do you think elected officials, Republicans, who are going to be facing an election next year, President Trump, who has very much talked about his numbers in 2024. He would not want to see approval ratings dropping. He would not want to see his party losing any majorities in the Senate or the House. If you were in the room with these elected officials who are strategizing for the future and they're looking at this number, what is your advice? What is your point of view? How should they look at these numbers?
Uh, I think it's important to understand that probably one of the things that we're seeing and that we as a country have to admit is that really the Latino voting bloc is one of those blocks that is not a guarantee for any faction, for any political party. It changes based on the issue and really on the political conditions. I think I do agree with the assessment that the economy is not doing well for many people, and we see the data with the inflation, the cost of living, the access to healthcare, And in addition to that, the way we are witnessing the execution of the immigration, the raids, and the rhetoric that's coming out of that. I think it's important to understand that messaging and engagement early on is imperative. I think there's a lot of consensus with the way the Trump administration presented its ideas. I think that the Republican Party has presented an alternative to what the left has been presenting in probably the last 5 years. The Democrats have lost a lot of their moderate base, and they've lost a lot of the Latino voting bloc as a result as well. So the Democrat Party has an issue. They have a fundamental problem, and it seems they're trying to fix it, but I don't know what's going to happen there. But what I do know is that there is an opportunity here to present something that in the Latino community we know, and that is you work hard, you have a good, healthy economy, you can raise your family, you can achieve your American dream, but they're not feeling that. I do think that when we talk about the waning support by Latinos to Republicans or Republican candidates, it is definitely a warning sign. I think a lot of people have forgotten that we already lived through a Trump administration. And frankly, for many people, it's not what it was. This is very different. And many people are highly skeptical. There's still the remnants of individuals who are connected one way or another to the immigrant story. And part of that is coming from a failed nation, a nation that grew too powerful within its borders, where politicians, particularly presidents, became very abusive, very dictator-like. You look at what's happening, that's a flashback for a lot of people. It's really concerning. And, in America, we've always believed in the sensible approach to our solutions. There's been dark moments in our history, but for many people, they're living at a time of high uncertainty. And I think this is not only hitting their pocketbooks, but it's hitting their vision and their love for feeling like they are a part of their community, a part of their country. And I think that fundamentally what Republicans are doing is going to hurt them long
I want to make a couple
term
predictions here, and
because rather than
sorry,
Mhm.
Jonathan. I was gonna
Go ahead, go ahead.
heard you pause, but I wanted to say I want to jump in with a couple predictions here. One, on immigration, I think we're having. There's no doubt that the topic of immigration is, for many Latinos, a very emotional issue, and it's a very personal issue, either because of personal immigration stories or that of our families. Again, the prediction here, and I'm a little bit hesitant to say it, but I'll throw it out there, is that I do think that in after the midterms, there's a strong possibility that I do think President Trump will want to have a legacy in this space that goes beyond security and that goes beyond deportations. I think the fact that he has closed the border, I think the fact that for many of his supporters that they're seeing these mass deportations, they see him with a level of credibility in this space. So I think if he comes out with an immigration bill that is somewhat comprehensive, possibly some version of the Dignity Act, I think he is the president that can get it across the finish line. When you think of criminal justice reform in his first term, I don't think any other Republican president could have gotten the First Step Act across the finish line. I think we're going to see something similar on the topic of immigration. Again, I think a very bold prediction that many will say, no, President Trump is not going to be the guy who gets comprehensive immigration reform, but it is possible. The other prediction, and Monica, I want to tie this a little bit to my question to you, is that I do think there's going to be a surprise in 2026. There is something that the president is going to propose. Maybe it's not something that actually gets across the finish line, but I think he understands politics, he understands elections, and he understands that although he came out with a big boom in his first 100 days, I think 144 executive actions, Doge, things that his supporters see as, wins, I think he understands that those wins are not enough to get Republicans across the finish line in the midterm. So I think we'll see something. So keeping that in mind, let's say that is the case. And you talked a lot about how Republicans have maybe, in your opinion, failed to deliver on some of their promises. I think one of the reasons that Republicans did well in 2024 was just because the Democrats didn't step up with the leadership that Latinos were maybe looking for, right? President Biden, towards the end of his campaign, wasn't the charismatic leader that many look for in a president. Kamala Harris came in, only 170 days left. She didn't really hit the mark with many voters. In the Democrat Party right now, Hakeem Jeffries just endorsed Mondami. He's set to win right now in next week. Are Democrats really going to be able to offer that alternative, right? Maybe we're seeing polling that Hispanics are moving away from Republicans slightly, or Republicans are losing that confidence they had with Hispanics. But I think many Hispanics are just turning independent. It's not an automatic swing to Democrats. It's not an automatic swing to Republicans. What do you think Democrats are doing or need to do in order to make sure that Latinos don't just stay home and say, you know what, I'm not voting for Republicans, but I'm not going to vote for Democrats either?
I think Latinos want a vision. And I think was the key difference between Trump and Kamala Harris at the end of the last year's election is Democrats for like 8 years focused too much on I'm not him instead of I want to create this America for you. Trump told you everything that is happening. He told you there's going to be mass deportation. There were going to be ICE out in our cities. He told you he was going to put tariffs on, denying that they were going to bring up prices. He told us, he gave us a vision of America that I think a lot of Americans don't like. But I think we missed that position of what is the America. I think the Biden administration passed certain laws, certain things happened that gave you, again, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, investing in America, infrastructure. But I don't think they were sold on a cohesive vision of America. So I think that is what they're looking for. I don't think that despite the latest support of Mandani in New York, he and New York are going to be the North Star of the party. New York is a very particular city. It would be like assuming Memphis is the guide for Republicans. I think.
But I think it would. Gavin Newsom, for example, is a dominant leader within the party, or a voice. Let's call him a voice within the party. So I think just the way AOC became a voice, even though she only represents the same amount that any other House of Representative member represents, 800 or so thousand individuals, but she became a voice along with Bernie Sanders. So I'm not going to make the case that Mondami is the complete figure of the Democrat Party, but I do think he can play a role endorsing other candidates. He can play a role in just pushing the party a little bit to the left. So it's going to be interesting. I do agree with you that there has to be a vision, but I think there's going to have to be someone to step up and say what that vision is outside of people like Mondami. Do you think it's Hakeem Jeffries? Is it Newsom? How is that vision going to be communicated to Latinos and Americans as a whole?
I think bigger elections than just municipal elections will give you a guide of what the Democratic Party is going to do. I think New Jersey, I think Virginia.
Two big elections coming up as well.
Those are bigger elections that will give you a bigger guide. Their Latino communities are a bit more diverse than what we see in New York. So I think that will give you a guide of what the message is going to be. Newsom as well, governors. I think we're giving it too much attention to New York because it's New York. Obviously, it's a big city, an important city. Mondami and his style and his own labeling that is obviously very complex for the Latino community. But I think for the Democratic Party and its path to the midterms, New Jersey, Virginia, what is happening in California, I think will be bigger signs of where the party needs to go. And again, I think it's also different things work in different places.
Yeah,
So
it's also fair to say it's an off-year election, right?
Yeah.
It's not that there's elections across the country. We essentially have three major elections: New York, New Jersey, and Virginia, so that there's a zero in on that spot. Where I think Republicans do have to be careful is that I get Mondami is a big, in my opinion, figure in the news right now, but they can't overcorrect either. They can't just focus on him and think that just painting him as the entire party. They have to recognize that there are individuals, senator from Arizona, his name is escaping me now, but Latino. I mean, there are other figures. Rubén Gallego. There are other figures who have shown to be more moderate, who are not taking on the Democrat socialist position. But speaking of Congress, I do want to shift over now to our third topic. We're going to be looking at the fact that the government continues to be shut down. And the question that many are asking is, when will it reopen? At this point, we're about approximately 28, 29 days of it being shut down, which means it hasn't yet met the threshold of a historic shutdown in the sense of breaking the record, but we are just about 7 days away from it being the longest shutdown in history. There's a key date coming up on November 1st when more sort of individuals will be affected by the shutdown. There are many benefits like SNAP, like WIC. Many of these individuals do depend on these benefits. There are some who are saying, hey, we need to rethink these benefits in general, but I think most of us would have consensus that that's something that you do when the government is open. You don't do it on a whim. But the reality is when these individuals stop receiving these benefits, the pool of individuals who are even looking at the government shutdown as something negative will drastically increase. Many of these Americans are the most vulnerable. So I think it's going to open up the debate a little bit more. Hey, Jonathan, I want to go with you here. Who do you believe maybe has the upper hand on this topic? It seems a little bit difficult to maybe even ask that question in the sense that we shouldn't be talking about winners and losers. I think we all see, the government being shut down as something negative, but the reality is there is negotiations happening. Republicans continue to say that they are right on this issue in the sense that they voted on the clean CR. They point that many of these fundings are similar to the ones that they passed during the Biden era, something that Democrats voted back in March or April. Do you think Republicans will continue to hold on their position? What is their strategy forward? How do they either shift Democrats to their side, or how do they make sure that the narrative becomes one where they can continue to move forward with their strategy?
Yeah, it does seem that Republicans definitely have the political capital to keep pushing on this and keep pushing for a government shutdown, even though polling does show that voters do hold them responsible for this instead of Democrats. And I think short term, the Democrats have that upper hand. However, long term, I think that Republicans can definitely, from a policy standpoint, position themselves to get another win. I think this topic is complex in the sense that there's so much that can happen next week that can really alter the messaging and probably the strategy that both parties have. But this is just interesting to me in the sense that it does break away from a big reality, and that is so many people are being impacted, and it should be a warning sign that government's gotten too big. Government's in so many places that why are people depending on politicians to have certain things? But I think that long term, the strategy for Republicans should be to hold their ground. They have the political stamina, the political ground to do this. I strongly believe that there are some programs that if they need to go dry, they should go dry. But I think when we talk about the mandate that Republicans had, there's a lot that fits into this. The subsidies for healthcare, which have been disastrous and responsible for exploding the price of healthcare costs for many Americans, that's a very real reality. And when you look at other parts of the government spending, I think that, as you said, Wadi, as things start getting felt around the country, people will turn around and they will start looking at the political landscape. And I think that when that happens, most people are not going to agree with Democrats. And I think that's the biggest issue that they're betting on.
But Marco, I think that there is a point there that Jonathan has made. I think as more people begin to see the impact of the government shutdown, I think they're going to pay even more attention. They're going to start reading, okay, how is this going to impact me? When is this thing going to reopen? And I think as they read some of the details they'll come across is that the House passed their version. They're going to start paying attention that Republicans all voted in favor of a bill that would continue funding, and they'll start paying attention that Democrats voted no on this. Republicans have also said that a new strategy that they're exploring is separate bills that would reopen or provide payments to specific areas. There hasn't been a vote in this space, but if Democrats vote no on those, the sentiment might shift. People might start saying, okay, Democrats are voting no on these bills. Do you think long-term Democrats have a lot to lose in this space, or what's their view here?
Well, I think long-term is complicated. I think right now Democrats have an upper hand because, again, what they're doing is they're using that need of the Republicans to get those 6-7 votes in the Senate to say, okay, we have a limit November 1st, where if we don't get those subsidies extended, people are going to start seeing their insurance explode. We need to keep those Affordable Care Act subsidies in. I think that is a strong point, specifically because that was a promise by President Trump. I'm gonna bring your insurance down. It's funny here because the Democrats are trying to keep a promise that the Republican president came. So I think that gives Democrats an upper hand. As we go into next week, which has so many deadlines, it's SNAP, it's Head Start. People are going to start lose funding. I think we're going to start to see is who the survival of the fittest, who can withstand the complaints by the constituents, and that's I think a big part. But I think when, as you said, people are going to pay more attention. I think, and I mentioned a couple of times, is you see the president helping out Argentina, sending him $40 billion to help him out in a campaign that ended up helping him. But they're just going to say, okay, again, where is America first? I think as more attention, there's also more risk for Republicans in what they're doing. You also see that, yes, they passed a bill a couple of weeks ago, some weeks ago, but they've been on vacation for 5 weeks. The House is not in session. So
They say they've done their job because they sent it over to the Senate, but I hear your point.
Again, you're the majority. You have to sit down and negotiate with the minority party those 6-7 votes. It's not so when people start seeing, oh, that we have to fix this issue, but you've been on vacation, you've been out of session for 5-6 weeks. What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing to help us? So I think there's risk for both as things get more complicated and we start seeing benefits cut. But Republicans have a lot of risk because, again, the image of there's not been a lot of America first the last couple of months. And you see that the key issue is, again, insurance. And Democrats, at the end of the day, are standing up for lower prices for insurance. And the Republicans don't want to negotiate on that, at least negotiate. Again, art of the deal. Somebody has to negotiate this. So, and the big thing, and we always mention in the shutdowns, who is in power? The Republican Party is in power. So the people that are not starting to pay attention, they're going to blame the person in the White House. So I think there's a lot of risk still for the Republicans.
One of the complications that's going to come in is, to your point on the House side, is, again, the House has said, we did our job. We're not there because we did our role. However, they only passed a clean CR that extends to, I believe, the second week of November prior to Thanksgiving, if I'm not mistaken. What means if this shutdown continues and there's no movement in the Senate, the House will have to come back, and they have different strategies they can take. One is just extend it even more. But at that point, you do, when they come back in session, Democrats also come back in session. They're also going to have a little bit more of a pulpit. House Democrats are going to be able to join Senate Democrats in some of the rhetoric that we're seeing on both sides. So I do think it will become a more complex issue. Unfortunately, you know, I remember when I used to work in the House, there was almost like what we all knew was that off-ramp that parties could take. Right now, I see it very difficult. Republicans want to stand very firm against the ACA subsidies, the Obamacare subsidies. Democrats see this as a big fight that they need. I think Schumer is getting pressure to make sure that they stand strong. So this is a conversation that it's not over, and it's also not clear in which direction it's going to go. But that's been the main topics that we have for today's show. I do want to thank Marco for being here in studio, joining us again. Jonathan, thank you for joining us this first time, hopefully not the last that we have here. And thank you to our audience who tuned in today for these topics. Again, this has been The Game, the show where we go play by play, analyzing the game of politics. Boom. All right.